welcome everyone to our Planning Commission meeting tonight. I've asked Commissioner Mitchell if he would lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from July 7th.
I move that we approve the minutes from July 7th, 2021.
Got a motion?
Second.
And a second. You were absent for that meeting, it looks like. Need another person to second those ones.
Oh, for August 4th.
Yeah, the second one,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, I've got a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, and then again, approval of the minutes from our meeting from August 4th. There were only 3 of us at that one.
I move that we approve the minutes from August 4th.
I was there, so I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next agenda item. This will be a public hearing. This is for a zone change proposal, 590 East Center Street.
If you don't mind pulling up the presentation. Perfect, thank you.
I get to let you know.
So while Mike's pulling it up, we'll just go over, once again, the request is for a rezone with the infill. So currently it's an R16, and so the applicant's looking for an R3 zone with an infill overlay. That would allow him to do a product other than a single-family residence on the property. Property is about 0.3 of an acre, and it's along Center Street. And for the last bit, the city general plan has indicated the future land use up and down Center Street as mixed use. Not necessarily a vertical mixed use, it could be a horizontal mix of uses, but it entertains higher densities than are currently found there, potentially offices and businesses, personal services, retail, those kind of opportunities. Where it's currently R16, there is the need for the rezone to the R3. So this image here, the property is highlighted in yellow. You can see the home that was previously there. The applicant did get a demolition permit, and the home was demolished, I'd say within the last 2 months probably. We jump to the next slide, and I'll let the applicant speak to this, but I'll just kind of highlight what I've included in the presentation. The recommendation that's in the staff report is based off of the recommendation from the DRC, and the key things that they found were the general plan designation and the intent of the infill overlay. They did have the condition that any approval is contingent upon site plan or subdivision approval, depending on how the applicant may want to keep the property, whether in one piece or do like a condominium of the units. And then obviously address any red lines that are working their way through the staff review. One suggestion that the DRC had, that the applicant has updated this rendering, is there's 4 units, each have a 2-car garage. The infill, we have a calculation that resulted in a need for 3 additional spaces that could be open to guests. They felt that would be beneficial to just push it up to 4, have 1 potentially for each unit. This is kind of conceptual. We'd obviously run it through a more rigorous review once the applicant gets the final say from the city council based on your recommendation tonight. So this is kind of showing the orientation. You can see it's great presence on the corner, a little different than what you might currently find up and down the street. I'm sure that will be a comment worth discussing tonight, excuse me. But at the same time, recognizing what the city's long-term vision holds in store for Center Street, especially as the west end of it is an important connection to an interchange in the future. You can see a shared access for all the units there on the south side of the property. One thing that the DRC was keen on making sure the applicant was aware of is maintaining landscaping. We'd probably have another tree or two there, as well as a masonry wall would be required on the south and then on the east. Let's go ahead and jump to the next
On the
slide.
west.
Or, excuse me, the west.
Okay. And would that stub, if it were to get approved, would the stub have a wall there for now? And
For now.
If it, so it would all be walled off?
To me, it could be,
Yeah, that's what we're seeing.
the design is twofold. One, obviously, it's the backing area for that northwest garage.
But at the very least, it'd have a wall, even if it still has that
Yeah.
inlet. Okay.
Let's go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. So these are some renderings, hopefully it's not overload for you, of the proposed project from the architect. You kind of get a feel for how you would view it from the different streets. The north, or the top right corner kind of shows the interior as well as what the potential side elevation would look like. I don't think we have the west elevation shown. Okay.
No, I don't have it. They show the east right there on the top right,
It's a mirror of the east,
or
right?
the south, I should say.
Probably a mirror, yeah.
Is it a proposed different material on the side and back than in the front?
It looks like stucco on the south and on the west, and on the back of the house, back of the fourplex.
So in order for this project to move forward, the infill, not just the rezone to the R3, but the infill overlay would need to be approved as well.
Is that a separate application later?
No, it's together.
The zone change, is the zone
With the
change with the
overlay.
infill together?
Yep.
Okay.
I'd love to invite the applicant up, but is there any other questions for staff at this point? Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon.
Do we have another
John,
pointer for-
you gonna be the one to talk to us?
Sure.
Close to me, it might work better.
Okay. As, so, how am I gonna get this to point?
Red button on the front.
It's gonna blind him when he does it.
Right.
Just that one, okay? As
Nice.
far as your west elevation, that's probably the closest thing you have. Oh, no, right here is your west elevation, because there's the driveway, and this is 600 east. And so you'd be driving down 600 east here to Center Street up here, but that's the west elevation, because you can see the common driveway right there, okay? What we tried to do when we took a look at just the standard the standard elevations, it looked really busy, because the building is obviously, as you can tell here, is done on an angle, and so we did that, trying to be as making this corner as prominent as we could, and so we put it on an angle like that, and so let's see, and then your Center Street, that's your Center Street elevation, although it is a ways away, but this would be Center Street right here. So we've done several things trying to doll things up. You've got doors that are going in and hidden, so they're going in the side instead of just straight in. We've got balconies up here, and so we did several things trying to kind of dress that up on Center Street. Let's see, let me see if I can go back to here. So we took a look at, first of all, this is an R16. And so we had the possibility of dividing this in two right here, and putting two single families on here, and then took a look at putting accessory apartments on that. That was something that we looked at. Quite frankly, this looked cooler, so we went this direction. I can answer any, let's see. Oh, no, sorry.
Too far.
Yep.
So, on the sides and rear, are they planned to be stucco? Or is it hardy board on
No,
the
I think
side?
we're hardy board. Hardy and stone. Yep, hardy and stone all the way through.
All the way.
All four
Yeah.
elevations?
Yeah, yep. That makes it look a little bit, that's a little bit more of what's going on today. And so it'll be hardy board and stone all the way through it.
Is the radius into the garages okay for the cars to get in there? The two center ones look like they might be a little tight.
I think the south.
That was the reason, let me see if I can go the right, yeah. That was the reason for this right here, is just, it was, this worked, without this worked, and this worked, but not as, but not as nice as having that extra 7 feet right there.
So along with that, if I'm coming in this way and this is my garage, that's pretty tight.
Yep.
Especially if these 4 spaces are taken.
This, I think that, I'm going off memory here, John, but I think that's 32 feet.
No, that's not bad.
So, I mean.
That's what I wanted.
Yeah, you're not gonna, it's, you know, a Ford F-350 double cab with a long bed, you're gonna have a tough time there. But you're gonna have a tough time in the garage and everything else there too. But I think it was 30.
About 32.
Okay.
And
Yep.
setback here to the east, what are we at there?
15.
15 to the sidewalk?
Yeah.
15.
Yeah.
And are these single-family homes, or are you renting them out?
Single-family homes. There'll be four separate, that's what I was gonna answer of Brand. There'll be 4 separate deeds.
So will there be an HOA to
Yep.
maintain this whole property?
There will be. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you guys have been creative with your design, for sure. This is the one, of the ones that you've shown us.
Yeah.
I think
this-
that looks the
this-
best.
We had a couple of others that I came in and showed you guys, but there's 4 feet of fall from one end of this lot to the other. It doesn't look like it, but with that, we couldn't do some of those other designs that I was showing Planning Commission in March or April, whenever I was here.
Yeah.
So then we had to kind of nix those designs and started trying to come up with something else, and so we came up with this, trying to highlight, trying to make this corner real prominent is what we're trying to do.
What do you anticipate the price range being per unit?
Market's gonna, it's a 4-bedroom, so market's gonna dictate what, probably 380?
380 to 450.
Okay?
Do these have, you didn't do basements in these, did
Yeah,
you?
we did.
They do have
We got
basements,
basements.
okay. Basement, main level, and upper.
Basement, main level, and upstairs. So 4 bedrooms, living room there, and then a bigger family room downstairs, and then a bedroom and a bath downstairs. So, yep.
Will this be a masonry wall around the property?
Yeah, masonry wall, or the city council can, when they take a look at it, correct me if I'm wrong, if it's city council, 4 or less, we have the possibility of doing vinyl.
If it's
You know,
4
right there.
units or less,
Was to do the masonry, but ultimately the city council.
city council will decide that. Are there any requirements with those 4 parking stalls limiting, I mean, is each unit going to be assigned one?
I would be tempted, but I'm not going to be here. So this is going to be an HOA thing. But if it were mine, I would be tempted to put visitor parking only right there and not let any of these people occupy this with their boat.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I would do if it were me. But like I said, this is that we'll end up with an HOA here. And, if all the members of the HOA each have a boat, they might decide that, I don't know. That will be,
But they'll set their own rules.
but
then.
yeah,
Okay.
yep,
Yeah, the thing that's difficult is if you have a 4-bedroom unit, you're gonna have teenagers that are driving in those units as well, and that's more than 2 cars in a garage.
Yep.
So parking
Yep.
will be something.
They'll park along 600 east.
so,
Yeah, they'll have to
okay.
use the street for parking.
Three spaces.
If it ever got that busy.
Any additional questions for
Line the first shoulder.
the applicant?
We even have bike lanes there, so we're first shoulder.
I appreciate the innovation of the applicant to come up with some things that are definitely different than what we've seen in Spanish
Oh,
Fork.
there you go. Thanks.
And, it's an interesting layout that I haven't seen anywhere else for that matter.
Yeah.
I like it for a corner.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of cool for that corner. There's your basement layout, bedroom there, bath here, and then quite a big family room downstairs.
And these will be all the way finished when you sell them? Okay.
Even the basement?
Uh-huh.
That's awesome.
The total square feet in each unit, about?
2402, wasn't that?
Yeah, 23 to 2400.
Okay, yeah,
Right around there.
yeah.
Around 800 per floor,
So, yeah,
very small.
yeah. So pretty, even though it's a fourplex, the size of them is very comparable with a lot that's in the neighborhood, with a lot of the homes that are in the neighborhood. So,
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, John.
okay, thank you.
All right, this is public hearing, so at this time we'll move into public hearing. If you've got any comments, just approach, state your name, and let us know what you have to say. Yeah?
Okay, my name's Larry Mattinson, and I live next to his proposed,
On Center Street or on 600?
I live on 600.
You're on 600, okay.
When you say next to it, do you?
I'm here to protest the city of letting him build and changing the zone to his liking. I don't think it's right. It's not a good fix to have those 4 townhomes on that corner. I've lived there for 40 years. They should build 2 houses or 1 house, but no rentals or no townhomes. I just don't like it. It's a dangerous situation. It's close to a school, and with all them people living in them buildings, coming in and out with vehicles, we got a lot of traffic on 600 East. It's not a good fix. So, anyway, I'm telling you from my bottom of my heart, don't change the zone, please. It's not a good fix for that corner. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Anybody else?
It's Andre Garner. I live just across the street. It's kind of 35 south, so just a little bit over and across right there. But, I mean, while I look at what they're building, and it's a lot better than what was there, I mean, it was pretty rough. But, the thing that got me here was the changing of the zone. I just don't know. Is that a big area where it's zoned? Is it just like different parts of Spanish Fork has different zone for different things, I guess?
Mike's can actually show you, sir, so you can actually see the amount that's designated for a mixed-use designation in the area. Show them the general plan, it's probably
Yeah,
more
so
constructive. Yeah.
anywhere you see the the darker orange, that's what we're proposing, or that's what's being proposed tonight for this property, is to change that to the R3. So this would be the first one in that area that gets this zone. The other thing that we want to look at, and Joseph was mentioning this, is what the city's plan for the future is for that area, and that's what we're going to look at here.
So what you're seeing here is that entire swath of blue has a mixed-use designation within the general plan. The idea is that eventually, as it develops or redevelops or people sell their homes, it would have zoning that's consistent with mixed use. Either a higher density residential product or offices or retail uses eventually is what the general plan shows now.
Typically, one of the reasons for that is we try and put our higher density closer to larger roads, so that as you have more people, they've got a larger road to get in and out,
Yeah.
rather than in the middle of residential neighborhoods.
Yeah. I guess that's, my problem with it is, I guess, you know, and like you say, the city's changing and, but just, you know, to have, you know, the multi-units and stuff, I just kind of worry too about the future, you know, that one goes in and then all of a sudden people sell their houses and I know that's the way it's going. It seems like in everywhere, you know,
Yeah.
it's going more to multi-unit just because of the prices and stuff. But yeah, I'm kind of against that just for that reason. And just pretty soon you got nothing but multi-units as people sell their houses over the years. But so I'm kind of against that. I feel like maybe it should be stay the same as it is, not change. But you know, just someone that just moved in 6 years ago, and that's kind of what I wanted. I didn't want to be down further where it's all a lot more apartments and stuff. But same thing. At the same time, I understand, you know.
So would you have the same concern if they were to split the lot into and build multiple units, more than one unit, more than one house on that corner?
Oh, just like
A duplex.
A duplex,
Like a duplex.
basically.
Two duplexes.
Or two duplexes. They'd split the property down the middle. You'd have one duplex on one side of the property, one on the other. So you'd still have 4 units.
Yeah, I wouldn't make a difference. Actually, I think this looks better. I'll have to admit, it looks better than like the square kind of duplex look and that. But so I don't have a problem with that. just the multi-unit thing, I guess. I guess just the kind of the way things are going. You know, I'd rather have a choice. I'd rather avoid it. But I know, you know, also there's progress too. But you know, so anyway, that's just my opinion on it. Just it just gets a lot more, just like, you know, you were saying, it gets a lot more crowded and stuff. But like you say, it's Center Street too. But so just kind of maybe kind of the same objects, but you know, I understand where you guys come from too. So anyway,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you, Andre.
Thank you. Did you have comments you want to come up?
Yeah,
If you want to, state your name and speak into the mic, then they can pick you up on the TV.
I'm Lisa Garner, and I live in the same house as him, 35 South. There's not enough parking where they're saying they're going to be parking in front of our house, all along that street there. Kids walk there, you know, to and from school across the street there. And that is way too much traffic going in and out of there. Would you like it across the street from your house? It's just, we bought the house thinking, this is our house, this is our property. We don't want just a ton more traffic, just coming in to 600 East. They're already speeding up and down there. It's just not a good idea. Sorry for us. And I don't know where the rest of our neighbors are down the street. I know that, you know, we already have way too much traffic going and speeding. There's never police officers up and down there, and they're always speeding up and down that street. And it's just way too much, and there's not enough parking in what he said. It looks nice, but would you like it across the street from your house?
Thank you, Lisa. Any additional comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move out of public hearing and open it up for commissioner comments.
Could we maybe have Brandon or somebody explain what could go there as an alternative to this if this wasn't allowed? Because it could be duplexes, it could be a house with an ADU on it, and there's a lot of different options it could be that would be as impactful or maybe even not look as good.
Yeah, and with that, because I'm looking at the property next door, looks like the width from this end to this end is about the same as down the middle here. So I'm wondering, now that that house is gone, if they were to subdivided into two properties, would that need to come before the planning commission? If they were to put put a duplex here and a duplex here, would they still need the zone change?
So the lot is just over 13,000 square feet. So the first option, well, let me just back up one step. So obviously the option is there that they could replace home for home. So they could build a new single-family home. Currently with our ADU ordinance, they could do a home plus an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit. But then to go into multiple lots, if they stayed in the R16 zone, they need to have at least 6,000 square feet per lot. And off the top of my head, I think we're 50 feet of width. And so they've got over the width, they've got over the size, so you could potentially be looking at a subdivision, which would need to come through the city for review and approval. Now, depending on what they did on those lots, once again, puts it back in the realm of, if you do the infill overlay, if you want anything other than a single-family home product, you need to up zone to the R3, which in this case is consistent with the general plan. And so the applicant previously has met with staff, previously has come before the planning commission. That's the avenue that they're looking to pursue, is that option of a different housing product with the R3 and the infill.
Kevin, to your point about creating two lots and having two homes on it. It's interesting and kind of actually innovative in a way for this area, that what will end up happening is those 4 units, each unit will be the land that just the building is on will be owned by individual owner. So it'll be all owned in fee simple, and then the common area around it will be maintained by an HOA. So because of that, more often than not, I think it's more likely that all that common area will be maintained even better than an individual owner might maintain their yard, because they'll all be holding each other accountable, and the HOA will be holding the common area accountable, and they'll be paying a fee to maintain it. It's likely to be upkept pretty well. In fact, better. I would say better than even just 2 lots and 2 homes. It's maybe even 6s.
Yeah, the maximum, I was just doing some calculations on my phone, not checking text, sorry. The max they can qualify for is the 4 units, and so.
One thing that I might make a comment on, and that is that if this lot were to be subdivided into 2 and have 2 duplexes on each lot, the area doesn't change. Nothing changes, except you have 2 driveways that'll come out onto 600 rather than 1. With this proposal now, not only is it a little bit unique, and I think it looks pretty good, and I think it'll add to the neighborhood, but having 1 driveway instead of 2 helps alleviate having more people having to back out of their driveway. There's not very many houses in this area that have the ability to turn around and come out forward. This design allows for each one of those people to come out forward when they hit the road, and gives them better view of the sidewalk and the road as they come out. Any other way you do that, there wouldn't be enough room for a driveway that would accommodate that same kind of thing if you chop it in half and put 2 on each one. So I think in some ways this is actually a safer situation for children in the neighborhood, and for just the general traffic and foot traffic on the sidewalk there. That's just something to think about.
So Brandon, if they wanted to, currently, without changing the zoning, they could split the lots in half, build single-family units on each one, but also build an accessory dwelling unit behind those, which then again would be basically 4 units, right?
Just off of the top of my head, that sounds about right. Our ADU minimum is 6,000 square feet, which matches what the minimum lot size for both the R16 and the R3. Because without the infill, the R3, the permitted use by right is a single-family home on 6,000 square feet.
So the ADU obviously would be smaller than if they were to build this, but you would still likely have the same amount of cars.
Yeah.
And maybe not quite the same amount of people, but close to it without having to do a zone change.
Correct.
Okay.
When the DRC looked over this plan, was there any concerns with traffic or with those type of things? Because that was brought up several times.
I don't recall that there was any concern. The only thing I remember is that they appreciated that the driveway was pushed from the intersection. That's usually important to get those driveways moved as far as possible, just for safety reasons and people making that turn.
The only two were, one was just the turning, ability to turn around once you're back there. Same thing John already mentioned, kind of U-turn into your own drive, into the garage. That aside, the only other one brought up was when it does snow, you have to take your cars off the road. And there's 4 units with 1 or 2 cars, again, 4 bedrooms, there's teenagers and such. Where do they put their car? Where in a regular home, you'd have a driveway with 2 to 4 spots, even up on the sidewalk, plus the garage. This isn't quite to that level, but again, it's with the given space you have, I'm not sure what else you could do, but it is still something. If your teenager's out on the car and you're like, hey, you gotta move it, it's like, where do I put it? Everything's full.
Can you do an aerial Google view of the property all the way out to the school as well? Just curious where the school parking is. Okay, right there. Would they be required to move those ones off the road as well in the wintertime? You know?
I don't think so.
The school parking right there that's to the north?
That's,
That's the only parking at that schoolhouse.
Yeah.
That is?
Yeah, it's all diagonal all around it.
Okay.
And so in the winter,
Generally, it's overnight parking
Yeah.
that we're concerned about.
Of all the places I've heard our guys going and ticketing and stuff, they haven't mentioned this one. So I'm guessing they don't.
So that's
Yeah,
really
the
my...
idea is you need it off the street.
My main concern with this development, or any development, even if it was subdivided and you had 2 units, it's the parking. Parking obviously is, I think, the biggest issue and concern here. During the summertime when you can park on the street, no, but in the wintertime, if you've got more than a few cars at this unit, I don't know what we do. And I don't want to create a problem at the same time, so.
That's my concern as well. I mean, really, my only concern is the parking, because it's interesting because this design is reminiscent of the Shalon that's just up the hill. I think it's really innovative and a cool design, but I am concerned about parking.
Shalon's parking lot's a little bit bigger though.
Right.
Kevin,
But the
what's the
design-
width of your drive going into along the south side of the,
I believe it's 28 feet.
28 feet?
And also, we, just for the record, we do meet all the parking requirements for this with a couple of extra.
I don't.
Kevin, come to him.
He loves that.
I'd just like to point out that we do meet the parking requirements plus 2 extra stalls for this. And if we decided to subdivide it into an R16, we're still getting the same amount of vehicles, same amount of homes,
Yeah.
because we'd have 2 ADU units in the basements. And if you do that, there's no, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no requirements for landscaping, fences, HOAs, there's nothing. You can grow weeds there as long as you keep them 6 inches less. With this, you're getting fence, you're getting landscaping. I think you're getting a lot better product. So, I mean, those, to me, straight up are the 2 options.
So is it possible, is there room to include a parking here and a parking here, or is that too narrow?
Something we could certainly look at.
It's just that I live by
They will anyways,
a big
right?
development that has, well, I mean, their parking
That's what's
is,
wondering.
requirements are met,
Stack
and it's woefully inadequate.
I think that's, yeah.
And I could see that, I mean, the development I live near is much bigger than this, but I can still see that that'd be a thing, especially when it's a 4-bedroom unit.
Yeah.
That's my only concern.
And I can respect your concern. There might be room to put 2 on the side there. That is a good option to think about. But, yeah, I think in town, we're always gonna have people parking
Right.
somewhere. I hate to say that, but even
Right.
where I live in my neighborhood, there's tons of vehicles out on the roads.
Right,
So
we
it's
love
not
our
even,
cars. We love our cars.
Yeah.
You just hope that these 4 that are banded together by an HOA could use their Spanish Fork spirit and work together with the parking.
And I agree with you.
Still difficult.
So two and a half
I think no matter-
units, or 2.5 parking stalls per unit is what the requirement is, which you meet plus 2 extra.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Kevin. I'll give you another 2 minutes. How's that? You bet. You betcha. Absolutely. Since you made the effort to be here tonight, we'd love to hear from you.
In the morning, there is so much traffic you can't believe. People bringing their kids and people walking. And at night, the school bus traffic is terrible. I mean, they're screaming down that road. So I tell you again, it's not a good fix for that lot.
Okay.
It's just not.
Okay. Thank you,
Thanks
Andre.
again.
So from what I'm hearing, Andre, to address your concerns a little bit, whether this gets approved or not, even if they were to subdivide it, which legally they could do that as well and put multiple units on, you're still going to get the cars and the parking and everything on that corner. The only difference is by approving this, it now falls under an HOA, which means your landscaping and everything else through the years is probably going to look better than if they were to build 2 units on there, 2 homes. Plus, it'll require them to do some fencing, they'll have to do some fencing standards and a few other things.
One other additional question I had, Mike, maybe this is for you. Is there any plan for signal or anything here in the future? Do you know?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment.
There will be signals on Center Street, obviously, at some point, but not current plan, no.
Is there a crossing guard here in the morning, so I'd assume?
There's the flashing beacons for the 20 miles an hour, and then a crossing guard if they come to work. Or a police officer, if the normal crossing guard can't make it, they have a police officer that tries to get there.
Yeah, they usually always have somebody just.
Any other questions or comments, thoughts?
Seeing none.
Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we recommend the approval of, that this property be rezoned to R3 with the infill overlay zone being approved. Based on the findings and conditions that have been listed here.
Add the 6-foot masonry wall,
That
if you want to.
I think that would be.
I would.
Be determined later, right? And that we recommend that there be a 6-foot masonry wall constructed around this property.
Okay, I've got a motion
Second.
and a second. Let's do a roll call vote on this. Commissioner Ernest.
Aye.
Commissioner Mendenhall.
Aye.
Commissioner Warnick.
Aye.
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 Okay, that motion passes. So that'll go before the city council, I assume at their next meeting. Dave, do you know? So the 7th. So you've got another opportunity if you'd like. They're the ones that have final say on the decision. So another chance at the apple. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item. This is the Wasatch Pallet, changing the zoning for their proposed location from an I-1 to an I-2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The subject property here is at 800 West, 1000 North. We held a public hearing in your last meeting in August. Since that time, the applicants were good enough to host a tour that most of you joined us for. We had some neighbors that that toured the existing Wasatch Pallet site then as well. Personally, I think that was pretty enlightening in terms of what they do, how they do it, and gave us some insight on how the operation will work at this new location. So I guess after all of that, just kind of by way of report on how we got to where we are tonight. As staff, we really don't have anything new to share beyond that. Our recommendation is that the zoning be changed from I-1 to I-2 to specifically accommodate Wasatch Pallet and how they have proposed to operate on this site. We're not necessarily concerned about any aspects of what they do and how it's going to impact surrounding properties. I think it's a pretty good fit, and it's a good opportunity.
Backing out at this point.
I have no idea what those are.
Right.
So, that being said, I think Commissioner Ernst is probably touching on one legitimate thing to think about anytime zoning is changed. The zoning does not run with a particular property owner or business or anything like that. So should plans for this property change in terms of how it's going to be used or anything like that, there is not necessarily a second bite at the apple that the city would get if maybe an applicant presented a proposal that met all of our requirements to operate a different kind of business in the I-2 zone. So I think that is something that definitely is worth thinking about. That being said, the investment that's currently being made in this site to accommodate Wasatch Pallet, and given how that project fits into some other plans that the city has that we think are pretty important for the community, we think certainly warrants making sure that the zoning fit for what they want to do and how they, I think, need to do that. So again, that's our recommendation, that the zoning be changed to I-2. I don't know if anybody has any questions for me.
If the zoning gets changed tonight, do we see a plat approval or anything? What's the next step?
You wouldn't. So with the staff report, we've included all the materials that have been provided to us. Well, we've included some very descriptive materials that have been provided to staff with the site plan approval, which incidentally, the DRC approved the site plan for the operation earlier this summer, really with this zoning issue just simply being, I'd say, a condition of approval. They could operate many aspects of their business the way they want to do it at this site under the current zoning. So should the zone change not be approved, that wouldn't prevent them from opening up a facility that manufactures pallets here. It would probably change how they would have to operate a little bit. And for a number of reasons, I wouldn't recommend that we do that.
I do have one question, and that regards this piece of property. Is Wasatch Pallet intending on using the entire property, or will there be a division of this property for other uses?
That's a great question. And one thing that, Brandon, what was that?
This isn't the current site plan, though. This is relatively similar.
So the image that we had it before suggests that the zone change would apply to all of the property. That's one thing that you as the commission certainly can consider as you make a recommendation to city council as to whether or not the property that right now is one parcel, which includes what Wasatch Pallet's going to be occupying, as I understand it, day one, plus some space that would be left vacant that could be utilized by Wasatch Pallet in the future or potentially sold, used by some other use. You could make a recommendation as to whether some part of the overall site, like what they'll be using right now, be zoned I-2 or the whole thing. But this, if it's not the latest and greatest site plan, it's fairly close, and that shows what of the property they have an approval to use.
If that property that is not planned to be built on at this time were to be developed later, considering what is on the west side and on the south side, it seems that industrial 2 would probably be the zone that they would like in there anyway.
We haven't had concerns necessarily about recommending that the whole site be approved for the I-2 zone. But all of the surrounding properties are currently zoned I-1, like the subject property. And really, just to talk about this, and we can pull up the zoning code if that helps at all. And this is a barometer that we largely have developed as staff over the years in terms of what's the big difference between the two. The I-1 zone is really explicit about indoor, no emissions of sound, smells, any kind of, for example, like dust and those types of things. Very limited outdoor storage under very specific conditions and that type of a thing. Very limited operations outdoors. And much of that can be said for what they propose to do with their new facility. I think they mentioned that they anticipate, for example, constructing a building that's maybe twice the size of what they're operating out of now. Probably there will be more under a roof with the new facility than where they're at today. But still, they'd like to do more outside than what currently we have permitted people to do in the I-1 zone. And that's why we're here as much as anything.
If that property that's on the west that isn't part of their plans right now, we're zoned I-2 tonight, it could be, they could petition to have it, the zone changed later if that was to be segregated from the rest of the property.
Correct.
Okay.
Are you comfortable that with an I-2 zoning for Wasatch Pilot operating there, that their use won't cause overly burdensome issues for the neighbors versus an I-1? Specifically I-1 versus an I-2?
Yes, and they've operated out of the existing facility now for 15 or so years or close to it. And
they have residential neighbors there.
Considerably closer than what I think they would ever have at the new location. And honestly, I was
Well, that was the purpose of the field trip, was to determine just that question.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're asking my opinion, I have less concern today than I had before we visited the site. I thought that was really insightful. Some of the machinery that they use and things like that. I mean, a chipper, shredder that shreds pallets and that type of a thing. I assume that would have emitted a lot more dust and would have been a lot louder and everything like that than indeed it is. And understanding that they're going to upgrade, for example, their dust collection system for the new facility. And for a lot of different reasons, I don't see this as having an adverse impact on anybody either.
Thank you.
I'd be interested to hear what the neighbors who came to the field trip with us thought
You could just
from
tell Dave to
before
sit
and
down.
after. What?
Thanks, Dave.
Like, I'm interested to know what your concern, did that field trip alleviate your concerns?
Well, maybe we should wait for the public hearing.
Oh, is it? Oh, sorry.
We have a public hearing on this, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
there'll be a
sorry.
public hearing on this. Does anybody from Wasatch Pallet want to add anything? The applicants, you got anything you want to say?
State your name.
So Tom Worthen, I own Wasatch Pallet. And I just want to kind of make it on record that for the last maybe 5 years, we've been working with the city. They came to us initially and asked us if we'd be willing to move. We don't own any property. We were happy where we were at. We're a part of the community. I think people see that, they recognize it. We do a lot to show our participation in the community, and in doing so, looked at purchasing the current piece. At the time, looked at buying a piece of property to see if it was something that we could do. In a way, it could be a win-win because we could get away from the current homes that have encroached where we were at. When we first were there, it was all fields. And so it wasn't an issue, but as growth happens, they've just come our way. So to help the city and us, it can be a win-win. We went out and started looking for property, but we require rail service. And so that made it a little bit more difficult to find a piece of ground that could accommodate a rail spur to be put onto it. We were able to find this property, we were able to purchase it. And so with regards to the zoning, it's always been, with the city, they said that they would do everything they could to make us whole. So we're currently zoned I-2, and that's all I'm asking for, is that when we move, that we stay I-2. I don't have any intentions of, I've been doing the same thing for 20 years since we were in Springville and moved over here. This new site will allow us to do improvements, a better dust collection system, a lot more cleaner site, just because where we're at, it's just hard to do some of the infrastructure with the utilities and everything the way they are, we're just kind of tapped. So this does allow us to, I think, improve our site, improve the mode of operations that affects maybe neighbors or the cities, working within the city. And so really all we're asking for is just to take the I-2 where we're currently at, transition it to where we're at, and our operation should not change. It'll be the same.
What landscaping plans do you guys have for your new location if this goes through?
Landscaping is far, okay.
We can hold that.
Okay. There'll be landscaping in the front on 1000 North. And
So it'll be along here and then along.
yeah, and then along Depot Road.
Okay.
So street frontage.
The property will be fully fenced in or walled in.
Okay.
I don't currently have that where I'm at, and I don't like it. It's hard. And the more homes that have come in, the more kids are curious, and they find their way. That black path wasn't there. They put the black path on, and that brought traffic, and you can just walk right by the river and get into me because I can't block that off. And then on the north end, you can also get in. So that's another thing that we'll have here is fully landscaped, fully walled in, fully fenced, fully secured system.
Will the things that you had indoors stay indoors at this new location?
Yeah, or more.
Or more?
Yeah,
Okay.
the only thing outdoors at this facility is what we currently do outdoors, which is we take pallets and wood and grind it up and then turn it into like landscape chips that we color and then resell wholesale to retailers that use it for landscape, like bedding and stuff.
Thank you.
That's for those of you that were able to go visit, all that's gonna do is you could essentially pick that up and put it over there and the operation stays the same. Same grinder, same everything.
Perfect.
And then everything else, we're currently in 2 buildings, and that will all shift to everything under the same roof.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's all. I kind of just want to make that clear for everyone.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move into public hearing for this. If there's anybody here that would like to address us. And you guys had the opportunity to go on the tour, and Sean, I think, was asking if you just kind of...
So my name's Lynn Oplenop, and yeah, we did attend the tour, and I think most of our concerns were addressed and alleviated. The biggest thing was dust and everything else, but looking at the process and everything, I think that's as long as, and Tom and I talked and said, as long as we have open communications, there's something we can do, or we're having issues, we go over and talk to them. So I don't see any issues with them. I would have concern about if they did sell and we went to I-2 on something else, if it was dirtier or noisier or something, that would be a concern. But Wasatch Pallet itself we didn't have concerns.
Okay.
So.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, we'll move out of public hearing. Any commission comments?
Then I have one question. As I visited the site, there's the house just across the tracks as you go toward your house. Do you guys own that home as well, or is that owned by someone else?
No, right across the tracks is our home.
The little old house that's there? Okay. Right there.
We're probably going to submit that for historical because it's built 1880.
I know people who have lived there.
Yeah, so that house, we own that house.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I sure appreciated the hospitality and how great Tom was for going on that tour. That was great. Thank you, and appreciate how community-minded you are.
Yeah, Tom's tour and just the questions that we had last time when we met, just the couple of us, it definitely resolves some of those concerns those talking points that we were concerned about, what it was going to look like, what is that operation going to be. So thank you for showing the tour and thanks for being here tonight.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion if there's no additional. Were you going to say something, John?
Nope.
Don't want to cut you off.
Nope.
You were.
No, we're good.
I move that the planning commission recommends approval of the zone change from I-1 to I-2, and that the applicant, in order to get the zone change, is consistent with the findings, staff's findings.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that goes to the city council. Next agenda item, we've got some changes for Title 15, some Title 15 amendments, which will also be a public hearing.
You might actually consider this. We're going to talk about the wall now, if you guys want. You have
Almost done.
You have an updated version of what we're seeing here. I appreciate Brandon putting that together for us. The Development Review Committee discussed the proposal earlier today, which is simply to allow for an additional type of wall to qualify to meet the city's requirements for screening around outdoor storage areas. And maybe it's a good time just to look at that. I think we talked at least briefly with you about this once before. So as I understand, the concept would be to use, let's just say, for example, in the freestanding kind of manner, like what we see on the image there on the left, that type of wall, which is a stackable concrete block, to be allowed for use, like I said earlier, to screen an outdoor storage area. Right now, the city, by way of our construction standards, limits the options that people have to meet that screening requirement to a particular type of precast concrete wall, or a couple of different particular types of concrete walls that are constructed with concrete blocks that are adhered together in a particular fashion. Title 15 simply says that are adjoined with mortar, therefore being permanent. You don't take those and they can't be moved and that type of a thing, which may be one of the benefits of the wall that we're seeing on that image there. So to just try to sum up really quickly what the DRC has recommended, particularly in light of the zoning that is being discussed for this site, the I-2 zone, we felt like there was some value in allowing the stackable blocks to qualify as a screen for outdoor storage areas, but limiting that allowance to properties that are zoned I-2, and then we said I-3 as well. That really reduces how prevalent they could be in Spanish Fork. There's just a handful of properties in the city that are zoned that way. The other consideration that we had has to do with proximity to like a street. And in short, the DRC has recommended that the construction standards, and if necessary, we amend Title 15 as well to allow for that stackable type of block to be used to screen outdoor storage areas where screening requirement comes into play, unless they're adjacent to a public street. And if it's adjacent to a public street, then the current standards would apply, which would require those other two types of concrete walls that I described earlier. In the case of Wasatch Pallet, that allows them to probably use the stackable product for about half of the length of the boundary perimeter that would have the screening requirement applied to, and the other half being along Depot Road. That would be one of the other two types of walls. Does that make sense? So
One of the other two types of walls are currently approved.
exactly, yes. So property zoned I-2 or I-3, only when it's not adjacent to a public street. And then the last consideration simply would have that the wall where it is used be coated with the same types of coating materials that we use with the other masonry walls. They do a couple of different things. An important one in my mind is it makes it a lot easier to deal with graffiti. Once you get those coverings on, if you ever need to simply cover up graffiti and that type of a thing, it's relatively cheap and easy to take care of. Whereas if it's concrete that hasn't been protected in some way, I'm told it's quite a bit harder to deal with. And in particular, we're talking about areas that are a little bit more remote, which not only would maybe be the case at this site that's zoned I-2, but some of the others that we have zoned, like I-3, for example, creating big blank spaces that are really inviting for people that want to make their mark. You know, again, we think it's a good idea and it's relatively affordable to put that coating on. So that is the recommendation from the Development Review Committee on allowing for the use of this particular type of block as a screen. The other thing that the DRC mentioned that we'd like to get the Commission's recommendation on is simply allowing the applicants, should they choose, to build up to an 8-foot height instead of 6 feet, to be allowed to do that. Our ordinance is a little bit, I think, unique in the regard that the maximum height of walls and fences in Spanish Fork is 6 feet, unless the city council approves otherwise. So when we get proposals to build fences or walls that are taller than 6 feet, they go to the city council, and the city council says yes or no. And in this case, we will ask the city council when they consider that question as well, feeling like, that is, we feel as the Development Review Committee that this is a great site to maybe add another couple of feet to the wall around the perimeter, whether it be the precast wall or the stackable wall, whatever it is. So
Does that mean right here, you'd have 8 feet here, 6 feet here?
conceivably, it could be 8 feet at both or 6 feet at both. Our recommendation is that if the applicant wanted to go to 8 feet, they could.
But we're not
But at a
asking,
minimum,
we're not
it would be
asking
6
that,
feet.
we're not asking that they match where they come together, are we?
We haven't, and they might have an idea as to what they do or don't want to do there that they could share, but.
So for reference, all of our city streets, you see that precast wall, like the one on top left, those are all 6 feet. The only ones that are higher that we have are around substations.
This DRC says they can't do this along public streets, though, according to this.
Can't do the stackable, but could do, yeah.
A regular wall.
And rather would be required.
Yeah, so that's why I'm asking, I mean, is it,
We're all on the same page.
do we care about appearance if you've got 2 feet above, you're on this road, you've got the 6 foot, and then all of a sudden there's this 2 foot?
That's a good question.
Personally, I wouldn't.
Okay.
I think in
Unless you're
the
on the
big
train.
scheme of the length.
Step up a little bit?
You're just gonna see this. That's what you're gonna see there. You'll see a fence coming to this and then that.
And then that sticking out?
Okay.
You'd
Yeah.
hope that they get the corner somehow, but.
Okay.
One of the other great things about using a stackable, sorry, jump in, is this west boundary isn't set where the east boundary is, right? And there's a street here. So what it gives them the ability to do is if they decide to add on, obviously they come back with their site plan or whatnot. If you do this type of fencing along here, it's pretty permanent. Those are pretty deep, big foundations, very work intensive to move. Where this one, they could move it over 40 feet relatively easily.
And
Dave?
this is capped and stained or painted.
Yeah, and that's part of the proposal.
On
So
both
like
sides or
this.
just the one side? We only care,
In this case,
care
we're
about the
only
one
concerned
side, right?
about
The
the
outside.
outside.
Okay.
Typically, we require developers, like in residential developments, to put the paint or the coating on both sides, but
in this case, we're just looking at the exterior.
that's what we talked about, yeah.
Makes sense.
One question I have is, the cost must be attractive, or we wouldn't be asking about this. I can see it being an advantage if you thought that the walls would need to be moved, because in general, these aren't grouted in, they're just set on top of each other, right? And so they can be disassembled and reassembled somewhere else. Or if there was a different use for the property, you don't just lose the fence by having to knock it down. Would it be the city's, the question for the city is would we require this to be painted? Or are we okay with it being just the natural concrete color?
Painting, staining, and wall caps.
Yeah, that's required.
Painting, staining, and wall.
The outside.
Oh, right there.
Painting,
B.
staining, and wall cap. So, yeah,
Yep.
if
There
you
you go.
like that, then our
What's
recommendation.
a wall cap? Is that
Very good, I like it.
If you look, I don't know if
what
you
we
have all-
see right here?
Yeah.
So they would need that. Okay.
And there's, I think, a detail with the staff report that shows that as well.
Okay.
I appreciate that on our field trip that you pointed out what they were at Wasatch Pallet. They have some
They do. That's
in
right.
use in the middle of their property. So it was nice to look at those.
There's a retaining wall, but similar idea how much better it can look with the stain.
Yeah. Okay, this is a public hearing, so we will go into public hearing. Does anybody want to address?
Just, I think we got all the facts right except for the difference where the elevation would change is about 1'6". Because we put a half of that block under the ground for stabilization, and then, so it'd be like 7'6". tall.
Okay, good to know.
And it is a cost, I mean, to do the other wall is going to cost Tom a lot more money. But we'll do what we need to do to make it work.
Could you state your name?
Craig Bennett with Design Build Contractors. I'm the contractor. We are putting a lot of work into Depot Road, so I want it to look good when we're done too, because Tom's dumping a ton of money in there and hopefully get some of that back through the bonds and whatnot. But that's really all we gotta say is make sure that you know that it's, and there'll be gates going in and out too. There'll be nice gates so that we can keep people out or from coming in anyway, so.
Are these blocks locally available?
Yeah, they're in Lehigh. Yeah. There's a total of, when we figured, there's 2,200 blocks. And most of it, well, it's probably a little bit more than half of it would be what we figured going down Depot Road. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? They do stack up. We use them a lot up in Bluffdale and around. We've used on a lot of projects, and they really do hold back as far as retention. They're grouped together. To move them, you got to start at the top and just disassemble them and put them together, just like Lego blocks. So. But they're very. I think we submitted all the engineering on that too. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Ken Cordner. I'm also with Design Build Contractors, the contractor on the project. The stackable blocks have, there's another couple of reasons why we think they're important. In this type of application where it's, an industrial site and you have forklifts and equipment moving around all the time, the lighter weight concrete fence, if it's hit with a forklift and damaged, is really expensive to replace. You'd have to replace it. With a stackable block fence, it can be pushed and moved and straightened out, and it just works better for his application in an industrial zone. And you see this all over the city already. It's on freeway entrances and exits, underneath the bridges, the walls. It's being used much more frequently in many applications where you want a stone face, but something that's more rigid and commercial than just a fence.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll move out of public hearing. Anybody have any additional comments or questions? And if not, I would entertain a motion.
Todd, you got it? You want me to get it? Sean?
Go ahead, Jim.
I move that we recommend the proposed changes to the Title 15 amendments.
I'll second. Got a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Next agenda item. Looks like we've got an annexation, the Morel annexation. Is it Morel or Morel? Anybody know? I can't remember. I think it's Morel.
You say morale.
Sam Morrell?
I think so.
I'd be happy to present it and address any questions. Unfortunately, we don't have a representative here tonight. I know he called in and spoke with Kimberly earlier today, and we were hoping somebody would be here. This is a...
Said he wasn't going to be here, but he was gonna try to get somebody else.
Okay, perfect. And jump in any time, but this has come before you a number of years ago. Maybe Commissioner Mendenhall was the only one at the time. The property, as you can see from that line here, is at the intersection, the north side of the intersection of Woodland Hills Drive and Main Street. On the east side, largely vacant, there's a home and some outbuildings that are slowly being torn down. On the west side, there's a couple of homes that for now will remain. That's where now I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, the Morrell family, I believe the father lives in one and the daughter lives in another. And then further west, we have a future detention basin property that's owned by Salem City. And then there's another individual, she owns the furthest west portion. So this go around, we've had quite a bit of conversation with Utah County, with Salem, and then internally, obviously. If you look at the recommendations, some of the findings and conditions are pretty specific, and so I'll just highlight some of those. We're looking at about 37 acres on the south end of town. And the DRC recommendation is very specific to the west side being zoned RR and the east side of Main Street being zoned C2. And so currently the general plan land use designation is commercial. You can go to the interactive map if you'd like, Mike. Currently it's designated commercial. Just up Woodland Hills Drive to the north a little bit, there's a prominent intersection that is also general plan commercial. And so the applicant, my understanding in piggybacking with the future Sunrock subdivision that's working its way through the review process and hopefully will come before you soon, they'll have a stub road that comes out the south, and that would eventually connect into either Woodland Hills Drive. Well, it will connect into Woodland Hills Drive. And so the applicant wanted to kind of leave an opportunity to maybe do some additional housing there on the north part of his annexation, but the city felt very, very confident and firm in keeping a large commercial, non-residential presence on the corners. And so we've seen a few concept plans where on the west side, a significant portion of the corner would be reserved for commercial, and then the east side, pretty much the entire area that you see there would be zoned commercial upon its annexation to the city. Currently, a large portion of it is within our growth boundary. There would be some utility issues to work out, but with surrounding developments, hopefully that would be expedited and somewhat alleviated. But there still would be some cost as far as development of the property. And then the specific conditions, we've touched on the zoning. And then the second one, this was very specific request from Utah County. They want to maintain jurisdiction of Woodland Hills Drive, but they do not want the road to be split. There's some examples in the valley. I'm thinking of the road between Linden and Orem, where half the street is in one city and the other half is in the other. Utah County has requested that we avoid that and it either be annexed entirely, it's in its entirety into Spanish Fork or into Salem. So in conversations with Salem, they didn't have any concerns with it being entirely within Spanish Fork City. And so our request is that the plat be modified as needed to include all of the property needed for the cross-section that Utah County has provided. It's a mouthful, but is there any questions at this point?
So,
Go ahead, Todd.
So when he says the north side of his property, he's just like referring to this section?
Yes.
Is in his mind, he wants the whole thing to be RR for now, or brought in
For
as
now.
RR. But then or the applicant, they're planning on this being commercial, but they want to keep the flexibility in case they want to put some residential here.
Correct. Which we feel might help with the transition, because the project to the north, you're gonna have 12,000 square foot lots and larger, and then to just dead end it into, you know, the back of non-residential. And so they came with a couple different townhome layouts. DRC gave them some pretty direct feedback as to what they'd like to see in the future if he does pursue those. But at the same time, he's still kind of juggling, how long do the Morels want to maintain their residences there? If and when they see the growth in the area, the property may become available, and then they'd have a bigger palette to work with.
But for us to be able to have some say in what that is developed as, we would prefer that to be RR for now, so we don't have that abrupt commercial to residential.
Yes, but we'd also like the commitment on the east side to
Yep.
preserve that C2 commercial zoning. So that therefore, if they wanted to come in and propose something else, it would have to come back through a very public process.
I have a question regarding a canal. There is Southfield's main canal, runs along that road right there and then goes this way, crosses the road and follows that tree line. And so that's, I know that we're not talking about any plat plan or specific use of the property, but when UDOT came in here and made the turning lane here, they had to deal with that and make sure that that was taken care of to allow for traffic. If this is going to be used as commercial, we need to be aware that Southfield does, and that is their main canal, all the way along this
We have a
annexation.
canals layer. Don't mind turning that on, Mike. And that definitely, we appreciate the heads up.
Yeah,
We definitely would investigate that and have them address it with their.
It is new pipe in there that was just put in about 3 years ago, and there you see it there, so. And that lateral right here takes care of this property and it waters this way. There is another one that comes along, you can see it right there, that goes under and goes along and waters back this way and across all of this. So it's gonna be there for a while, and of course, the main canal will be there as long as there's a Benjamin. So it's there.
Which is more of a reason to keep it RR for now on that side.
Yeah, well, yes. But that canal goes all the way down here and past ALA and then goes down across the freeway. It is a major canal that, you know, they run about 85 cubic feet per second through there. So it's a large conduit.
Is it buried now, or?
It's all buried now. Yeah, they put in a new structure that is just about right there that has a screen raker and everything on it to keep the trash out of it. And it is covered all the way down to the freeway.
So usually how we address that is we see first, do they have an easement over it, and is there restrictions of?
They will, they do have an easement that is recorded. I know that for a fact.
Do they typically allow paving on top of something like that, drive aisles and parking lots and things like that?
Yes, with the conditions that would be put into the right of way and the easement, yes.
Okay.
And that is.
Still developable.
Yeah, the canal it was established in about 1860.
So like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, just, well, if you count.
They haven't really been there that long.
If you count.
I don't know why they'd have a right.
Leap years.
It's a historic structure, that's why they're so hard to move.
That's right. Okay, could you go back to the last map that we were looking at? Was that general plan? Or was it current zoning?
That was the general plan.
Could we look at general plan?
We wouldn't have a zoning designation for this property yet, since it's outside.
Right, okay, so remind me what, oh, no, go back one more. Remind us what this is again?
Medium? That's medium density. The lighter yellow is low density, so it just corresponds with certain type of development. So low density is usually like an R112, medium, anywhere from 3.5, I think 8 might be the cap per acre.
And that's Sunrock we've been talking about, right?
That's
Right.
Sunrock, yep.
Right, yeah. I was just wondering what this little weird, like, you know, chicken leg bone was and the purpose
Yeah.
for that being there.
My guess would be just the way that it embraces Main Street and.
That's the wetland project that
Comes up
has
out
the
of the
pond on it, and this
Right.
this is Spanish Fork City
Right.
owns that part, that fence, but then this is, well, I won't say who owns it, but it's privately owned.
Yeah.
I don't want to say who said it.
Okay.
Brandon, so going back to Woodland Hills Drive, if we annex that and that the full length of the road gets brought into Spanish Fork, what happens if it needs to be widened on the Salem side? How does that work?
So Utah County provided us the full cross-section. I'm trying to remember which road within Utah County, I'm looking at Mike, which road it's similar to, maybe North County Boulevard, up in, we had an email chain, I'm sorry, I should have brought the exhibit, but their only request to us was to preserve exactly what they need at the build-out. And so beyond that, if they came in 20 years and needed additional, then it'd just be the same process that they'd go through now, they'd have to acquire it.
Wow, North County Boulevard's huge.
Yeah, this was over 100 feet, and then it added additional width on the north side, I believe. We're gonna have a trail. And so they wanted to kind of accommodate that all within the annexation into Spanish Fork. And I think our engineering department and public works was in favor as well, because we have utilities in the road, and it would make sense just to have control.
There's no concern with upkeep or cost of that at this point?
No, that'd be something jointly with Utah County.
Okay.
Any idea why the property didn't want to be annexed, so it comes all the way to the road?
It just wasn't ready at this time. Yeah, there's one little piece, or there's more than one piece. You can see if you turn on the zoning layer, you can see there's some discrepancy between property lines and,
So I
Yeah,
think
so
it
it's
was
this little-
this one and then this one, right?
yeah, those are out of it.
Okay, so that belongs to this, which makes sense then.
Does that little piece that sticks out there, that doesn't count as a peninsula?
No, across the way, it's still in the county as well. Mike's having way too much fun.
Yeah, he is. Well done.
Put the puzzle together.
Very good.
I did the best we could.
And annexations they're not public hearings, are they?
With the city council.
But not with us. Okay. All right, does anybody have any additional comments for this one? If not,
Are there any concerns? Is there anything to be concerned about?
Just keeping that C2, like the city's asking, I think that's important, but. So
I'm okay with staff's
Yeah.
recommendation on this one.
Me too.
Sorry, Jesse, go ahead.
I move that we recommend the annexation of the Morrill property with city's findings, including Woodland Hills Drive as a part of it. I don't know if I'm missing anything there.
we need to designate on which side of Main Street.
All findings found by the city
And conditions.
and conditions as listed.
Okay. Okay, we've got a motion,
Second?
got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that goes to the city council. Next annexation, Utah West.
Is this the one that was tabled from last?
It was, yeah. So back again with this one. A couple of things have happened since your last meeting on this. We've met with the applicants in a couple of different forums. I met with them and some of Utah County staff people to talk about what's included in this annexation and kind of its configuration, some different things like that. And then we had what I felt, frankly, was a miserably unproductive meeting as staff with the applicant. It's not the applicant's fault that it was unproductive, but along the lines of us trying to prescribe some things that potentially would be requirements that we could articulate in an agreement that would put everybody on notice about what would need to be done in order for development in this area to happen. We really didn't make any progress with that at all as staff, which I think probably has led to the need for some other conversations that we need to have that I don't think probably are really appropriate to get into tonight. The simple concern has been, I think is still that once property is zoned a certain way, there are certain rights that come with that are real and that have significant effect, which is often why with annexations that we really don't zone property for development at that point in time. One workaround for that is to try to foresee and kind of premeditate, what all of the needs might be to accommodate a particular kind of development and to spell that out. In as much as those typically go beyond then what our fundamental requirements are for development improvements, on-site improvements and things like that, so that the city has the ability to require more when somebody proposes a site-specific development plan for the city in the form of, let's just say, like a site plan. And the city's obligated to act on that and approve it in as much as it meets our city requirements that really don't contemplate properties that are maybe remote from a lot of infrastructure like what a good part of this is. And that all being said, I really don't want to get necessarily more in the weeds on those issues than what I just maybe suggested or mentioned. And I really felt like the conversation that you had in your meeting last month was helpful and healthy, but at the same time, even then I felt like we were getting into probably some issues, again, I would say getting into the weeds in a way that probably in terms of just considering an annexation proposal like this one that aren't necessary for you to really dive into. So I'm going to kind of revert back to just the fundamentals for tonight, which is that we've anticipated this property would be annexed. This is a little bit ahead of what mentally I guess I had scheduled. But certainly the city constructing a sewer line through this area I think has been a game changer. We thought that would happen, and that's why we're seeing this annexation proposal. That's why I think we'll see some others on the west side of I-15 here as well, probably for the next many years now going forward. That being said, I guess I'll kind of also just hang my hat on the recommendation that the DRC has made already, which is to approve the proposed annexation, to zone the property industrial, but also to have the applicants enter into a development agreement that is intended to, again, identify what would be required if somebody were to develop in the area.
It's common practice, those are recorded against title, correct?
It would be, yeah. That's often, if we haven't done that in the past, it's been an omission.
You have done that in the past on properties I'm familiar with. I just want to make sure in this case that would happen.
Yeah, and the reason for that is
to put the property buyer on notice in their due diligence.
Yep.
It's hugely important.
Yep,
It's just a professional city doing that, right?
Yeah.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure.
About what you just said?
So I reviewed some of this from last meeting, I wasn't here, and my biggest concern was that it's premature to designate a zoning, for instance, I-1, without the city being able to accommodate the infrastructure. So in this case, now fast forward, I see this condition 3, which is that part of this designation to I-1, the staff is saying we can't do I-1 unless there's a development agreement in place that who's participating in what costs with the infrastructure to accommodate the I-1. So currently, Shauna, the way that the infrastructure is now, it could not actually service an I-1 use in the area. There's not enough infrastructure to service that. So without putting the development agreement in place and then recording it against the properties affected by the development agreement, anyone who went to buy this property wouldn't know that they owed the city money when they go to develop. And so it'd be a gotcha. It'd be a hidden unpleasant thing, and it's just not the right way to do business for the city or the property owners for that matter. Does that make sense?
So the question is the recommendation is that we recommend the annexation, but don't approve the I-1 zoning?
So because this condition 3 is there, it's the only reason I could recommend.
So now that gets
I-1.
written, you said on the title, property
Yeah.
title?
So the development agreement on title, the development agreement would be recorded against title. So anyone who goes to buy this property,
Would see
they
that
would
there's-
pull it up and there'd be a link to the development agreement in their title report. And they could read that development agreement and actually know how much they owed to the city for their share of the infrastructure costs.
Gotcha.
Which is one purpose for the development agreement. And we actually have different agreements that accomplish that, reimbursement agreements, things like that we record. Really, I think our main concern, for example, would be if we had an exhibit that said when this particular parcel is proposed to be developed, this road needs to be constructed in this fashion, this water line needs to be extended from this location to the property, this power line needs to be extended from its current termination to the property. Yeah, absolutely, and that's the
So that's
important
all
part.
hidden unless it's against, unless it's recorded against title.
So that's why we want it in the light of day, but then as well, simply the concern that I have is that our ability to require those things may be somewhat limited if it's not articulated in that way. So maybe it's both a belt and suspenders kind of approach, because indeed somebody still needs to go through a development review process before a project can get approved. But annexations as a process is a little bit unique, given the amount of latitude that cities have to describe exactly what's required before projects can be developed and that type of a thing.
And it's common for an annexation to be accompanied by infrastructure development agreements. I would say it's more common than not.
And the reason that we would recommend I-1 is because that's the general plan
Yes.
for that area?
Yeah.
And so we wouldn't go to it would still be the same if we did the rural residential, which is the holding zone.
So let's talk about that as a plan B. But for there being a development agreement that sufficiently describes what's necessary for the area to develop, I think the city would be making a tremendous mistake to zone the property for development. In this case, the for development, because of how the general plan reads, would be to zone it industrial 1.
Yeah, 100%.
With the idea that zone changes maybe are a little bit akin to an annexation in that it gives the city a bite at the apple to exercise some legislative ability to require certain things, or to not zone property for development until it's ready, until the infrastructure's there. So those are two different steps that give me a lot of comfort, given what I do, trying to give the city some advice about how to stay out of some situations that can be hard to deal with. If zoning hasn't been provided for development, then the city's really not in a position where there are rights extended to a property owner there that maybe become a challenge to deal with in the future. But at the same time, if somebody's willing to enter into an agreement and it spells things out sufficiently, and as a property owner, they're given some of the assurances that come with having a property zoned and that type of a thing, which I think has real meaning in a lot of different settings, then I would say why not as well, if it's consistent with the general plan and that type of a thing. And that's really why the Development Review Committee recommended what they recommended here 5 or 6 weeks ago. So
Thank
again,
you.
that's the recommendation. I think you have a couple of different options though. Yeah, I understand that that's being addressed with Utah County. And maybe I'd ask the applicants to give us an update on that. I'm hoping they may be a little bit more up to speed than I am right now, but we can get up to speed pretty quick on it.
What's that? It was 10 a.m. this morning on the county commission.
We've been given some, I guess, encouragement that that's not likely going to be an issue that would prevent the city from annexing this area. Partly with the idea that, and this is just my understanding, that Utah County would prefer to have the property in Spanish Fork if somebody's interested in changing its use, so that they have that happen in the county.
Are any property owners affected by this against the annexation? Affected by this, or any Meaning, are any of the property owners in that yellow?
Within the annexation area, that, I don't know.
No. Within an annexation, for it to go forward, and the reason that there is that peninsula is because they were not able to get signed petitions. Any property within the county that's rural property, which is 1 acre in size or larger, they have to sign a petition. And so as I receive these annexations, I make sure that every property, every parcel number has a designated signed petition to go hand in hand. So everybody within that yellow area has signed.
And they're in favor of the annexation?
They've at least given their consent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave. All right, do we want to hear from the applicant for this? Or is this, with it being an annexation, I guess there's multiple applicants, right? All the property owners are part of the applicants, or is there a specific one?
They have representatives, same folks that were here a month ago. I think, however you proceed now is entirely up to you.
Okay.
Let's hear from
Okay, let's hear from the applicants. If there's anything additional from last meeting that you want to add? If not,
What was the county commission's vote this morning?
Commissioner? Is it appropriate to hear from Lynn?
Yes.
From Lynn? Is it appropriate to hear from Lynn? I'll leave it up to you as well.
From who?
Lynn.
Oh, yeah, the applicants?
They're sick of hearing from me.
No,
It's your
we,
call, but just.
okay, yeah, we'll open it up if property owners, if you guys want to add anything from last time, we'd love to hear from
Our
you.
biggest concern is being a peninsula and everything else, and if the county's able to service us, being a peninsula where we're isolated on both sides from city, that raises a lot of concerns because it is a long, narrow path through there, clear up to Steve Johnson's place and Jay Merrill and his mom, and that's all now just county, very narrow path. And then the access that we talked about also is if we block this and stuff, we'd request access to the north or to get out. But that'll be more in the development plan stage and stuff like that. So
How does the county currently service your property in your areas, and how would that differ
well,
by
that's
this?
with any emergency. It's all county sheriff. It's all. And there's confusion. That was the biggest thing. We talked to a couple of attorneys and stuff about this, and that's what they said. That's the biggest thing is there's confusion where you're in such a small area. If your house is on fire, somebody's going to call. We're out of town. They're going to call Spanish Fork City. It's technically not in the city. Is there confusion? Do they go? Is the cops coming? So they said it is a public safety issue if there's confusion on who's going to respond or something else. So
If it's a house fire, does anybody know?
We respond.
Spanish Fork would respond because of.
yeah, so those were
How
just the
close it
concerns
is.
the attorney,
Okay.
when I spoke to a land use attorney about this and about the island and peninsula and stuff like that, that's what he said, that's what has to be addressed. To make sure that the county commits to service because you're not in the city and there's no commitment from the city to service you, so.
Okay, so that sounds to me like an issue that needs to be brought up with the county.
Yeah, but
not
that's part of
necessarily
the
with
peninsula
us.
issue with all that, so.
Who's
And it
providing
was
your
brought up.
electrical power there now?
Strawberry.
Okay.
And that issue was brought up as part of the agenda of the county today, right?
We're checking on that.
It was on the agenda, Steve.
It was on the
It's on the
agenda.
county commission agenda.
We don't know if it made it through or what the verdict was.
It's good to make us aware of it though, and make city staff
Well,
aware of
and
it.
that's right,
Plan
and
for it.
you're gonna have that and it needs to be addressed and then.
So with them being in the county would be responsible for that though, right?
Not really. We have
I bet we have agreements with them.
mutual aid agreements, for
Yeah.
example, with Utah County. Oftentimes Spanish Fork City Police will respond to
Rather than the
emergencies
sheriffs?
and things like that, for lots of different, I think, just practical reasons. Nonetheless, I think what Lynn's talking about is exactly why we hate dysfunctional configurations of the city boundary, where there are peninsulas or islands or different things like that. In my view, it's really unfortunate that a few years ago the state law changed to where now it's a lot more difficult for properties to be annexed in logically configured kind of ways. There's some tools that cities had before 2017 that gave us the ability to require more than we can now.
When can we get Lynn a Don's hat? Get him in here, annex him in.
So, yeah, I was going to ask you, Lynn, what concerns, and maybe you've not really thought about it, but
Well-
what concerns do you have with being annexed into Spanish
Our
Fork?
intention is to be rural residential, long-term, and since it is I-1 in the master plan, if we are annexed in. if
You're
we ever
concerned
sell-
that because of our general plan, you wouldn't get that rural
Once we
residential.
annex in or something, if we determined to sell or decided to sell or anything, then it would be revert to I-1, and we would prefer it to be residential, rural residential.
And so by staying in the county, that
Yeah.
protects that.
So would it be possible to have them annex and zone them RR?
Well.
Not as
even
part
if-
of this annexation?
But even if they're a zone in the future I-1, there could still be a non-conforming use with their residential.
Right, but if they were to sell, they would lose that and they
But
can't.
the buyer who they've sold to could choose. They could still keep it as a residence, or they could rezone to I-1.
Is that true?
Yeah, that-
Yeah.
Because we were explaining if we sell, it goes to I-1.
No. Zoning, that's a decision that's made by the city council, either at the time of annexation or when there's a proposal to change the zoning of a particular property. And I really don't want to speculate too much about what the city council would do in either
It
case.
depends on what happens.
Yeah, we're not interested in annexing at this time.
I do think, though, that there's a really high likelihood that if you ever did want to be, that the city council would be comfortable deciding that rural residential zone that we have to the property. That's.
Because that can be
typically
changed.
what we do.
Yeah, and
One thing that I do need, I asked you about the power and how you're served. If SESD is servicing your power and you're annexed, you become a small peninsula, it does make a difference where that line comes from. Which direction does your power come from to your house?
it comes from the west along the railroad tracks, which is an issue where if we do the rail spur or something, that'll have to be moved, and that's another issue, but that's probably more in the planning, plot design before.
So it comes along the depot road?
No, it comes along the railroad track.
Right along the railroad on the north side?
On the
Or
north
on the
side.
south?
Yeah, north side. So, and there's a
So-
irrigation canal right there,
Yes.
Westfield, and same thing but that's part of the other development too, I mean, both sides, so.
Sure, they'll address that too. So,
Okay.
okay.
So we've currently got residential, within Spanish Fork, there are quite a few residential homes that are surrounded by industrial, right? I mean, what we're looking at right now, just south of this, you've got the residential that now we've rezoned the property to the north as industrial. And so this wouldn't be something new if in the future they were to annex and come in as RR. That's not like that would be an exception to the rule.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest exception would be that if it would be really unique for our city council to zone somebody's property in some manner that is different from what they would like it to be zoned. Really, that they've given property owners historically a lot of deference in that regard, particularly if it's somebody that just wants to continue doing what they're doing.
The example is the Designation annexation.
All of that out there.
The city asked to have it zoned industrial. There were property owners that desired to keep it rural residential so that their property could potentially, they would be able to expand. And so they requested certain parcels stay residential, and the city council didn't, they did those particular ones.
That was really distinct though, because we don't want houses closer to the airport. We don't want more houses closer to the airport, but the idea that property is zoned rural residential so somebody can continue to do what they've been doing. Again, I don't want to speculate or anything, and I'm not trying to talk you guys into filing to be annexed or anything like that, but I think those are concerns that I think everybody share the same goal if somebody wants to continue doing what they're doing in the county.
I can also tell you, Lynn, that I have experience with living on a parcel of ground similar to yours up on Powerhouse Road. Most people are familiar with the power plant there. That's federal property, and it has never been annexed. Part of the reason, well, there's a lot of reasons, but they just haven't come into the city. But yet the property to the east, to the west, and to the north are all city property. And with all the canals and all the structures that were there, I had occasion to need officers there in a hurry. And Spanish Fork City was great to respond. It became one of those things that whoever was closest responded, but the county had the ultimate authority there because it's county property still, or within the county boundaries still. But we got response, and it was great. You know, we didn't have a problem with that. I don't know if that was an agreement with Spanish Fork City or with dispatch or what, but we never really had any problem with that end of things at all. And at one time there was a little bit of a question about roads, but that was resolved as well. So there's been a pretty good relationship, city and county, on that particular peninsula. So.
One other thing to add too is maybe now is not the time to design, but there is a wetland. There's a lot of natural springs that run right through there. There's a lot of wetland. Right this year it's a little dry, but that needs to be addressed too.
It would be.
Yeah, any proposal that came before the city, that would be brought up for sure. Thank you for your comments.
Dave, when you were going through this with staff, you mentioned in your opening remarks that an RR designation was like a plan B. Was that vetted through staff, and they still came up with the decision of an I-1 with the condition 3? And they went through both options?
Yeah.
And they still felt that.
For anybody else, but there's a real hesitance for us as staff to do an about face and change directions from what we've told these folks what we had recommended and what we would support. But
I just wonder if there's any discussion that there's the pros and cons of either that would be worth vetting.
The pro to the city is that it lets us kick the can down the road with no worry. Really. So if we're not ready to.
But why did staff then feel, I mean, that's a big plus to me. Why did the staff feel that then to go to I-1?
I think we were out of order. I really, really do. I don't think that when we made the recommendation to go to I-1 back 2 months ago, we were probably as informed about what that meant as we should have been, really, is my feeling. So I do wish we would have deliberated a little bit more methodically in thinking that through. But rather we simply kind of kicked the can down the road ourselves and said, you know, again, like we've done before, and like I think is commonplace, if we have an agreement that specifies kind of big picture wise everything that needs to be done before something significant happens here, that certainly can work, and that was our approach. We spent an hour plus talking about this 3 weeks ago in the hopes of starting to draft some things that become exhibits to a development agreement, annexation agreement, and that sort of a thing. And we, in my opinion, just kind of went around in circles, feeling still like it's best to defer, for example, until we know exactly what a user would be for this site, because then we know how much power and water they would consume, and we know how much traffic they would generate. So then we can talk, you know, much more intelligently about precisely what's needed and that sort of a thing. I'm accustomed to a very different approach when annexation agreements are crafted than what we seem to be able to focus on as staff during that conversation. So that made it kind of a challenge for me. I don't know how well that answers your question. We talked then as kind of really just like a plan B, potentially just having the property zone rural residential, which is something that I know is going to come up with the city council when more of the DRC members are part of the conversation, that type of thing. So that I think is going to be discussed further for sure.
So when I read 3, Dave, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but when I read condition 3, it means to me that I don't even think the city council would hear this. This wouldn't even go to city council, even if we recommended approval exactly as the findings and conditions. I don't think city council should hear or vote on it until all the infrastructure agreements are in place. Otherwise, it's inconsistent with the condition. If they were to actually grant the zoning prior to that happening, it wouldn't match. Is that how you view it? Because if you don't view it that way, that's a problem. I think that's a problem for the city. I don't think the city should deal with this land that way.
Well, and I guess maybe I agree, and I'd add this to it. You know, we do try to put ourselves in your shoes, think about what you're concerned about and what, you know, maybe you want to see in a certain order. We have the same thoughts about the city council. If I were a city council person and I were being asked to take action on something that is somehow connected to an agreement of some kind, I would want to be able to study that agreement and, you know, completely comprehend what that means as part of the bigger proposal as well before I act on something like an annexation. So yeah, the idea that a draft agreement is presented to the city council at the same time as the annexation, I don't know if that's what you're getting at or not, but for me, it just seems like part and parcel. And as a council person, I would expect that.
Yeah, they'd have to go together. Otherwise, if the city actually, the city council's decision as a legislative body changes the zone, even if your agreements aren't ready. So I would want them to be ready with their decision.
So if this annexation were to go through with the I-1 zoning, if the property owners were to come up with a development or a plan that met the I-1 zoning, would that come back before the planning commission?
No. Be a site plan approval. If they propose to subdivide the property somehow, that would.
Otherwise, it would go straight to the city council.
Yeah.
I'm,
Just an update on the minutes of the county commission, and I got a text and watched the video, they did approve the minutes split by resolution.
okay.
Thanks for looking at that.
Thanks, Brandon.
Okay, so my thoughts, and this is just my own personal opinion. Without there being a specific plan in place for what this property should be, I'm not opposed to the annexation, but I personally think it be brought in as an RR and that we wait until there's specific plans in place that designate or warrant that it be changed to some type of industrial. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think it would be unwise for us to recommend something that we don't know, or we're not ready to service as we've talked about. We don't have the infrastructure there yet. And so we should see that first, what's going to be there so that we can get those conditions correct.
I guess the question I have about that is according to the city's reports and stuff, all the infrastructure with the exception of roads are available and can be accomplished with what is in the area now.
How do you get that, John? Because I don't read that in there.
My understanding is rural residential could be accommodated with what's currently there. But I might be wrong, John.
Okay.
Which rural residential is no development.
Yeah.
Practically speaking, it's no.
It's our holding zone.
But keep
And then when property owners are ready to develop, they have an actual plan. Typically at that point is when we change the zone.
And we have done that before and you know, punted to the RR designation, and I don't have a problem with that because that does allow the applicants to come in with specific things, and it does, I think, Joseph, accomplish what you said. They still can't do anything that would, you know, if someone comes and purchases the ground, they know it's RR, and there shouldn't be any expectations about what would be required without coming to the city and finding out what would be required.
So my comment earlier on what you're saying, John, is in the staff's findings, I think they're saying the infrastructure isn't there. That's why we want the agreement in place.
It's not there, but it's available.
Right.
Close. In other words, they're saying the sewer is here on the south side, and we've got water that comes down
But until we know what you're developing, we don't know how we can
We
service
don't
it.
know.
So that brings up another question then. Do we deny the annexation until there's an actual reason to bring it in?
So my thought, I came out different side of this coin, same concerns, just I came to a different conclusion at the moment, and it may or may not be right. But my conclusion was that the Planning Commission recommends approval, and I take comfort in condition number 3. That was the biggest issue for me, was that condition number 3 occurs, and it needs to occur prior to the city council meeting. But to your point, should the Planning Commission be sending things that aren't yet ready for city council to vote on? Because if those infrastructure agreements aren't completely dialed in by the time city council meeting occurs on this issue, it's premature for them to see it.
I agree.
So just, and I may not have understood what we just kind of had a sidebar about, but I do think it's appropriate that the Planning Commission not see this again. So the commission acting on it tonight, making whatever recommendation you want, and if that means that this doesn't go to the city council until we have a complete development agreement, which I think would be staff's inclination probably anyway, then that's part of the next step, and we calendar that.
Well, and my thought was that if we recommended it, the impetus would be now the motivation for them to get that figured out before city council. That was my original thought, is to move forward.
Move forward, but before it goes to the city council.
And and frankly, I trust staff. So I trust staff, I trust legal. You guys would figure it out before city council. When I saw number 3, I thought, okay, I can recommend it. That's for me, just so you guys are aware. But again, that's why I was asking Dave. For me, it's really important that city council doesn't see it until there's an actual agreements in place.
And I would feel,
ready to be executed.
I would feel sheepish going to the city council saying, trust us, we'll get this figured out and we'll whatever. I mean, so I
would still trust you at that point. I just wouldn't want them to vote on a zone change without the infrastructure agreement.
So typically in the past when we annex, it's because the property owners have specific plans that they want to do with the land. Are the property owners hoping that annexing with industrial then will open the door for you to be able to get the ball rolling quicker? Or what are your plans? What's your intent and purpose with the annexation?
Yeah, our intent is to follow the general plan. We were approached to put a sewer easement through the property, and we said, not unless we can be industrial. And they said, obviously we can't, legislate that from a staff point of view. We said, well, we're not really interested in having a sewer line through our property because now that dictates how the property gets developed. However, the general plan said it would be potentially industrial in the future. We said, as long as we can be annexed and be industrial, then we're comfortable with the sewer line. So I think we're trying to validate what you're saying and what everyone else is saying is, we're not naive to the reality that there still needs to be improvements in the area to allow development. We've had a lot of people request to be industrial users here, and we're in the county, and so they've all said, so we're going to be in the city, and I said, I don't know, we'll see. We have, I think what we're hoping to say tonight is we want exactly what I think you're saying. We would like a motion and a recommendation to go to City Council, subject to all the agreements, be it the annexation agreement, development agreement, and then that would allow the City Council to vote on those agreements subject to those terms. So,
okay. Not opposed to that.
I don't think I have.
Jesse, here's your chance. If I make the motion, you can ghost me.
I've been waiting for a long time.
I'm good.
Commissioner?
So we're in agreement that we're saying this doesn't go before the city council until those agreements are all in place.
That's my opinion.
That's what we're talking about.
I could make that.
It would be in draft form because
Yeah.
it won't be in place until the council.
Right. But something physical will.
Yeah.
Do you want me to wordsmith that? I could if you want.
You go for it, Joseph.
You're good at it.
Yes.
Well, I'll just say it quietly.
I move that the Utah West annexation proposal be recommended for approval with I-1 zoning based on staff's findings and conditions, and that prior to city council voting on this issue, the infrastructure agreements are at least in draft form for their consideration of the final I-1 zone designation.
Got a motion?
I'll second it.
I've got 2 seconds.
Shauna?
Okay, let's do roll call vote. Commissioner Ernest?
Aye.
Commissioner Mendenhall?
Aye.
Commissioner Warnick?
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell?
No.
Commissioner Carden?
No.
No. So it's a 3-3.
How does that work?
That's our recommendation. That goes into the city council as a split vote.
Yep.
Well, let's see, just a second. Let's talk about this. So our recommendation was before it goes to the city council, that needs to be done. So I think we need to talk about it a little bit more, because a split vote, how does that go before the city council? What's that?
In the real world, that happens.
Yeah, it happens
It's
a
only
lot.
here where everything is unanimous.
Yeah, it happens. They'll just see
Yeah,
that.
it's-
So they'll see my motion, the way
But
it's worded.
staff will still make sure that the motion, what Joseph recommended.
Joseph's recommendation with a split decision by the commission.
Yeah.
Okay, could you guys remind me one more time why you voted no?
I was gonna say that's helpful for the city council.
I prefer exactly what Kevin proposed. That is why I said no.
Which is rural residential?
Yes.
And that's what I had thought we were going to.
And you,
That's my bad.
and you prefer, you're not against I-1 if there's infrastructure agreements in place for you to review first, is that correct?
I would like the flexibility of having more review of what's going in there as they develop out the properties.
So not just infrastructure agreements, but whole plan, like development,
Like to see
for
that.
what's gonna be there.
Yeah, we've done it faster, we've put it in the RR holding zone. We've been able to see what comes about as developers develop the subdivisions, the properties, whatever they're gonna do.
Which doesn't mean it won't be industrial.
Still could be industrial, could be other, could be IT.
Which actually should be industrial because it's the general plan.
Yes, it just gives us more flexibility.
It just
I think
sounds
this
like-
actually sends a good message. I'm actually happy. I thought I'd be the sole dissenting vote, but I think it'd be good for the council to see it as it was presented and as we voted on it.
The reason I voted yes is because it sounds like developers are more reticent to move forward with development unless they know it's already for sure in place.
Which they still could if it were RR. They just bring those proposals now before the planning commission and we review it and then we.
Our intent to annex is industrial. There's no intent to be anything but that. Therefore, annexing and asking for RR as a holding zone would be out of sync with our intentions. I recognize the reasons that the city uses that. It's currently residential, rural, agricultural right now. RR is almost the same designation. This is so weird. So, if you look at the uses on RR and what the county currently has the zone for, they're almost the same. I mean, one's in the city, one's not. We can just stay in the county and get the same outcome. So, as someone who's wanting to fulfill the general plan and annex and go through that step, it's hard. I mean, this is hard. It would be inappropriate for us to say, bring us in as RR, and maybe one day we'll be industrial, if our intent is to be industrial. Does it make sense? We're not interested in staying residential.
Yeah.
So even though it's easy to maybe keep it RR for you, we could have just kept it RR, but in the county.
The difference is in the county, you're not going to be able to develop industrial. Whereas if
Not
it's
necessarily.
RR and it's annexed in,
Not necessarily.
then you bring a proposal before the planning commission that's an industrial use, more than likely because it meets the general plan.
There is current entitlements on this property as rural agriculture. They can be developed today. Right?
Yes, well.
And that's not what the city wants, right? That's not what the city wants. The city would like it to be industrial. So, I mean, I'm looking at this from the point of view of, what does the city want? The city wants us to be industrial. The city looks like it wants to do it someday
that someday we're trying to say we're willing to help make sure it's not never. And we have a letter from the city saying, we'll give you sewer. And we'd never say we'd give you sewer unless we'd annex you. And I guess that's the stress, is we trusted the city. We gave an easement, a big one, a very big one, a very expensive one. The city paid for it, which is appropriate. So we're just trying to communicate. We knew this day would come, and this is stressful.
I think the main thing, I think the real reason, we're not against the general plan or the industrial, but the reason that we would put it rural residential is because we really take our citizen responsibility seriously in being able to see a plan of what's going in. Like Wasatch Pallet, they came and they talked to, we had the plan, we went, all of that. And
So that was the site plan, and look at the degree you gave the Wasatch Pallet. That degree will happen to us. That doesn't go away.
So your concern is we bring it into the city as rural residential, now those property owners decide they'd rather develop or build a home on their property now that they're in Spanish Fork, rather than sell it or use it as an industrial use. Is that your concern?
I don't know if I would say it that way. We have industrial users saying, we would like to be here, and rural residential doesn't say industrial. Therefore, they'll say, how are we going to be industrial? Oh, we'll get it zone changed. There's no guarantee.
right.
We would say it would be better to go somewhere else where it is industrial today, because the ask to get industrial is just as hard as asking to get annexed, just as hard. So we're asking for it now because that's how we started it. We started this conversation with our annexation application is for industrial. It is not for anything else. So therefore, we're totally willing to go through the process to agree to the cost to bring the infrastructure up to the city's needs, right? Which is ultimately what I think is that connection to get from today to city council. Those things allow for all those things to keep happening. Otherwise, it's just easier to stay in the county. Like, go find industrial ground that is already industrial. Because those people, as you know, people don't want to develop 2 years from now. They want to develop today. So these are big employers, big employers. And we're just, I don't know. I look at this as like, I don't know about you guys, but if you were told you can have your job in 2 years, you can have your house in 2 years, you can have your kid's house in 2 years, you'd be like, what? That's just so long. So we're just asking for this process to follow what we applied for, which is follow the general plan, we'll agree to the annexation and the development agreement, and all those things in my mind hopefully create that connection and hopefully that confidence to say, we're not doing anything that's out of step. We're not doing anything that would cause alarm, because we're not saying, let's go develop it without the services, right? 650 West, which is right there, I don't know if you knew, but the city's sewer line has completely removed that road. There's no more asphalt there. And we were being told that our development would destroy that road. We didn't destroy anything. It's already destroyed. So there will have to be some improvements there. Why don't we be a part of that? Let's help create the next step. I don't know, maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but
I think those comments would have been, the comments would have been applicable before we had our vote, when the applicant had a chance to speak. That would have been a good time to come forward and address those things.
I think this whole night would be appropriate, right?
One, if I may, I'm sitting back there thinking of what's happening here, and I think the analogy of the cart before the horse is appropriate here. We want the horse first, and the horse is the annexation of industrial, and then we get the cart. But I think your vote here, these three, you want the cart first before the horse. So we need to get the horse, the annexation done first, and then the cart is the development agreement and the annexation agreement. That's just the way it happens. But we're here petitioning to be brought in with the general plan, which the forefathers have done studies and they want it to be industrial. So for you to say, and I'm not discounting your opinions, but for you to say that bring it in residential, rural residential, that's against the master plan. So I'd like you to reconsider. That's, if you want the cart first, that's not the way it's done. You need the horse first. And you need the annexation
Which makes sense. Part of my concern, and the reason I voted the way I did, is because in our prior meeting, we talked about access. And I wanted to be a part of understanding and knowing what are the accesses, especially for this family that lives in this home or is going to live in this home. And knowing now that if we approve this annexation, bring it as industrial, we, as a planning commission, no longer see what happens in the future. And of course, that's up to city staff and the city council, but I personally am interested in knowing what would happen with the access. And so that's why I would rather have a little more say as to what takes place.
I really feel for this family. I do. I'm in the county right now. And if this was to come to me, I'd feel like them, but nevertheless, they're in the county, we're asking to be in the city. So it's like,
we pick one over the other?
you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Well, what we want is the cart and the horse together. Does that make
Right,
sense?
and I think you're getting it, but we've got to get the horse first.
So I understand that they're in the county, but there's a good chance in the future they will be in the city.
If they
And we
want
need to treat
Yeah,
them as fairly and equally as we would anyone else.
I agree. We want to give them all the rights that they have, but the rights they have are county rights, not city rights. And for the city to look, yes, they need to look at their rights, but we're county property owners now requesting to come into the city, and it's not fair to discriminate against us for what they want.
I don't think anybody said that. My opinions were not based on that, and you're putting words in my mouth by saying that.
Okay.
That's not been the case.
Well,
My opinion, my vote is what I said.
I didn't mean to discriminate. I just, I think all of these points need to be brought up.
Sure.
Nevertheless, we're before the planning commission to accept our annexation.
And I need to say something about why I voted the way I did. And that is that we have a master plan, and in this committee, we pay a lot of attention to the master plan. And the master plan has always been that this would be zoned industrial. We have an applicant that is asking to be zoned industrial. I don't have the time nor the expertise to be of much value to the DRC when they go after this stuff. The staff has put in a lot of time about this, and I think by making the proposal that Joseph did, I think that we cover our bases with that. Nothing's going to happen there until those things are done. They are being annexed. It's not fair to anyone for them to disclose who they've been talking to. But apparently there has been enough interest in this property as industrial property to have these guys come and ask for the annexation. They're not asking for something that's outside of our master plan. And with the proposal that was made, with the motion that was made, I feel comfortable that those things will be accomplished by the time it goes to the city council. And that the city council has the ultimate decision in this, and I'm not kicking the can down the road at all. I believe that this is the right thing and that it has been done in the right way, including the master plan. And for us to do something else, I have to agree with what the applicant has said, that they've gone through the right hoops. They're saying that they will comply with all of the things that is in the report, as far as I can see. And I don't see any use in belaboring the points. If you want to see each and everything, just because it's zoned that way doesn't mean that each and every applicant that comes with a plan for any part or all of this will be approved. They still have to come for that approval through the appropriate city channels. And I think that I just believe that the city has been diligent in what they've done with the applicant. The applicant is accepting of those things that they have put down here, and it doesn't go against anything that I see. If it goes against something, I'm glad to listen to it, and I think I did, but I agree with this request that everything that we need is there. They're not objecting to anything that I have seen in writing or that's been discussed tonight. So that's why I voted the way I did.
Good. Keep in mind, the annexation we did just before this one, we annexed a piece of that property that was contrary to what was in the general plan. So it does happen. Dave, can you assure us that before this goes to city council, anything as far as easements, as far as access, as far as infrastructure requirements will be in place before the city council votes on that?
In place meaning that there will be a written narrative that describes what's going to be required. That'll be in the form of an annexation agreement that we'll expect, which in a case like this, every property owner that's a party to the annexation would sign. And that, like Joseph mentioned earlier, would be recorded with the county recorder's office. That's the only way that you accomplish what we have talked about accomplishing with an agreement. Anything short of that, and it is going to fail, I think, in some way. Also, it's customary at the time of annexation for us, for example, to require things like easements to be dedicated to the city, road right-of-way that might be needed to be dedicated to the city, different things to happen at the time of annexation because of kind of its unique nature that makes sure that the city's planning appropriately for the future. You know, I mentioned earlier that I was kind of disappointed about the conversation that we had with the applicants here a couple of weeks ago, and that's partly where I'm coming from. I think there are some things that with other annexations we've been able to articulate and premeditate and kind of plan for. I don't think we're close to being there with these applicants. I'll be honest, I've worked with a lot of applicants that have fairly immediate desires to develop, and typically we're meeting with their engineers and things like that to vet needs and deficiencies and all of that type of thing. We've had no conversations like that with this group at all, which is a big concern to me, and which is partly why I feel like the concept of having an agreement put together, you know, we're not at 30% design yet on that agreement. You know, we've provided a shell of a form to the applicant to review, but there's no you know, let's just say exhibit that really provides meat. That's not to say that we can't get there. It's not to say that in light of the recommendation that we have that we're not going to make every effort to get there before this goes to the city council, you know, is something that's a polished, finished draft for them to consider. I don't know if I'm going on too long with that, but this is the time to get it right. It's when a property's annexed. It absolutely is. And there's more than one way, I think, to make that work. I would very respectfully disagree with Mr. Simpson in that I don't think that necessarily requiring fundamental questions about infrastructure to be answered at the time of annexation is putting anything out of order at all. I think this is the time that you do that. And one way or another, I think that's what we're talking about.
It's clear to you that, and I don't want to put any words in everyone else, in the three nays votes, but I think I've heard from you three as well that what I'm about to say is true. I think all six of us agree the infrastructure agreements need to be in place before city council votes on it. I think we're all clear at least on that point. Todd, is that right? Okay.
Well, that's consistent with the DRC's recommendation as well.
Good.
Right? So that's good.
I also think that maybe I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not against industry in that area by any means. I think that I was put on the planning commission to make sure that we vet things that come through us as a planning commission before they go to the city council. And that's why I don't feel comfortable with sending this to the city council as of yet, because I don't feel like we've vetted this to what we need to. We don't know. There's lots of unknowns there still, and I don't feel comfortable sending that to the city council with that.
I know the approved uses in the I-1 zone, so there's a lot I do know.
Okay. I think we're set on 3-3.
And you do have another item?
Let's do it.
So that'll go before the city council. Is that timeline on that one now? That's kind of.
We're happy to work this quickly. Yeah.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, next agenda item. Zone change for 430 North duplex.
Nobody needs a break? Fresh drink?
No, it's the last item. Come on. Don't do that, Brandon.
I'm guessing this isn't really the last item.
Do you see the number 7 on there?
What?
I'm ready to put Dave on the spot and say this is the last item.
Oh.
There's no other
Nothing about
discussion
trees?
topics.
Oh, we
or-
have to get some scheduling done.
You were going to talk to us about trees,
So
I
close.
remember.
Almost the last item.
Not,
I appreciate the applicant being here tonight. Just a quick recap. So the property, the project's kind of referred to as the 430 North duplex. If we jump to the next slide, I think we'd all agree definitely an improvement over what was there before. On the left, you see the site plan associated with the project. I appreciate those that had the opportunity before the meeting to go by. If you haven't, feel free to go by and take a look at the site. Obviously, there's still a few things that need to be finished prior to completion of the project, such as the fencing and the landscaping and clean up things like the old driveway removal and whatnot. But specifically what the applicant has asked for you to consider tonight, if we go to the next slide, relates to the materials on the exterior of the duplex. And so the way the slide is set up is on the left, you'll see what was approved last year. This came before you in June and then was approved by the City Council in October of last year. And so he's proposing modifications from what was approved. Most significant change you'll see on the next slide as well, to the sides. To the sides, and then if you jump back a slide to the rear, proposing to change that to stucco. And then if we focus on the front, on the left-hand side, you see a brick wainscot. He's proposing to take that to a stacked stone veneer. And then you can see a few changes as far as adding vertical board and batten, removing the shingles and whatnot. And so the most significant change is just having some changes made to the front, but then a use of different materials on the sides and the rear. And so keep in mind this is an infill overlay project, and so there is a purpose and intent as far as when infill development takes place within existing neighborhoods in the older parts of Spanish Fork City. And so some of the things that the zone highlights on are looking at the general characteristics of the area, kind of protecting and promoting some of the historic themes, but then the new construction is of high quality. Any questions for staff, or would you like to hear from the applicant at this time?
Let's hear from the applicant.
Thank you.
Pass me a Diet Coke.
Diet Coke.
Sorry.
Thanks, Brandon. Yes, please. Diet Coke. Zero. It's the last time. I need it.
Easy caffeine.
Does the applicant want to come up and
Thank you,
address
sir.
this?
So I'm Roger Olson, and I just wanted to make some changes to the exterior. Upon further study and research, I think stucco may be a little less maintenance for the duplex nature that I'm creating this for. The front of it, maybe it's just a personal preference, but maybe just a little different curb appeal that me and the designer have come to an agreement on that looks a little nicer to us. So that's about it.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions for the applicant? So we talked a little bit about this. One of the concerns, and I'll bring it up, is that the stucco, in comparison to the homes around it in that neighborhood, is going to stand out a little bit more as compared to Hardy. Hardy has a similar appearance to the siding, and a lot of the homes in the area have the siding.
Yeah. But it is on the sides and the back.
That's the other part I noted the sides will be a little, they're fairly prominent, was my opinion. I visited the property and I noticed that the other properties around it have siding. And your original elevation, I think, is more consistent with the neighborhood. As far as the look, of course, your Hardy's nicer. It's consistent with the look of the neighborhood, and then you got that brick right there.
I don't know if you were here earlier, but there's another developer that mentioned they're doing hardy all the way around the building. I think one of the reasons for that is I think it's shown to be more durable and last longer than the stucco does. Over time, you don't get the cracks in it like you do the stucco. You don't get the fading like you do with stucco. And so I think just over time, the appearance of your structure is going to look better if you stick with the hardy rather than move to stucco.
Yeah, just, a couple studies that I've seen and talked to people that the hardy board gets a little bit dirtier and a lot of cobwebs get built up in the corners and the different things. And the stucco just maybe is a little less maintenance. And so that was the purpose behind that.
With this is an infill, and the purpose of that was to blend in with the community and to improve it, right? So that's our main purpose. And if it's just a maintenance issue, I build these all the time. It's pretty close to the same as far as what we get called back much more for stucco than we do ever for hardy, as far as issues with it.
I was hoping for your opinion on that, so thank you. If you didn't volunteer it, I was going to ask you.
So the thing that I would be fine with the changes of taking off the shaker. No,
The shake on the
shingles.
on the
Yeah,
pop-up.
taking off the shingles, and I like the vertical. I like how the change of the vertical, but no, I think the brick goes better with the community around it, and I think that wrapping it around the house looks better than having one thing on the front and something on the sides, especially when the sides are more visible.
What about the back?
I mean, I think it probably ought to go all the way around the back.
If I was going to do the sides, I'd do the back.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'd just keep it all the same if I wasn't going to do.
So I live in a home. I live in a home that's got hardy board all the way around it, all four sides. I've been there almost 11 years, and the maintenance cobwebs with the hardy board, I would say are the same, if not, maybe cobwebs and stuff. I don't notice any different. But some of the homes that are around me that have the stucco, you can see the cracks, you can see the fading in the stucco. So, in my opinion, I think the hardy board, even though it may have a little more maintenance, it's going to be a nicer looking home down the road than if you switch it back to the stucco.
I've had a few rentals, and one thing I can tell you is that when you rent properties, they're not as well maintained by those renters in general as if you own it. I have stucco around my house and I'm perfectly happy with it, but I have had experience with stucco on a couple of our other properties where a baseball makes a nice dent, and a few other things, lawnmowers run into them and stuff, and it has to be repaired a little bit, where the hardy board is pretty resilient that way. Yet hardy board is painted, and so the life of the hardy board will require paint, where the stucco, where I live right now, we made sure that we chose a color that doesn't fade. And if it fades evenly rather than going pink like some. So it's kind of I think the hardy board is more resilient and a little better product for rentals, but that's just a personal feeling. I don't have a problem with whatever you want to put on the back. It'll only be seen by the interior of the lock, but I think that the front I like what you proposed in the beginning, and I think either one of those are acceptable as far as the batten board style or the horizontal style vertical. I don't have too much problem either way. But like we were talking about, you know, the sides are going to be prominent there. That's one thing. When you go to the property, you know, you see the sides, both sides of that house pretty prominently.
Yeah.
So it'd probably be best to keep those the same, but
And I
that's
think
my view.
I think it fits in with that neighborhood better too, with the Hardy.
I do
Just it blends a little bit better, and that's like was said before, is that the inlay, that's the purpose of it, is to fit in and to add to that community. So I would say I would stay with the Hardy board.
So, doesn't sound like I'm gonna get stuck though, so maybe I have another question. So go to the side view. Is there a way to go back to the side view? So if I do the side with the board, I do the lap, is what I'd wanna do, and I don't have a picture of it because I wasn't planning on it, but it was my secondary plan, was to do lap board on the side, on the bottom half, and then board and batten on the top. Would that matter to anything?
That'd be great.
Match the gables on the front.
Yeah.
I think I'd be fine with that.
I like it.
Would he need to bring that,
I think just you audibly,
saying that would be okay?
So what would you do on the back of that
Yeah,
plan?
On the back, it'd just be the lap siding, the lap.
Yeah. Actually, that improves the look. I
do too.
I'm picturing that, would look pretty good.
I'd prefer
It gives
that.
it some.
And then what about the stone or the brick?
I
think brick goes better with the neighborhood.
don't have a preference. I think brick or stone would look good, but some have said, I guess there's some homes up there with the brick,
I don't have a preference on that.
so,
'Cause I think we'd rather do the stone, just, anyway, but,
yeah, I don't have
Stone
a
is kind of the
preference.
more updated look.
and that's kind of what we're going for this, but it doesn't match the neighborhood. I mean, nobody else has stone in the
If nobody
neighborhood.
else feels strong about it, I'm fine.
Yeah,
I'm
I
fine with
think
the
that's
stone,
whatever you prefer on that one. I think we're more concerned about what the sides are gonna look like, and if, it sounds like you've got some alternative solutions for that. So,
What do you guys think about the shingles versus the not shingles?
I like the one on the right, with, as far
We're gonna
as,
change the sides, I think that.
you're talking about,
Well, that's what the
you're
applicant's
talking
saying.
about
You'd go
this
with
compared to
that look and
this.
then around the sides
Right,
also.
yeah.
Right.
I think that'd look great.
Yeah.
A little more diversity on the sides than
Yeah.
that. Anyway,
So it sounds like we're okay with what you want for your changes on the front, as long as you wrap it to the sides.
yeah,
Is that?
Plan B for the sides.
plan B for the sides that I don't have pictures of, but it's what I want to do.
And you prefer stone?
I think I do prefer stone.
Would he have to provide that to the city
No, he
prior
said,
to do it, or?
It'd be helpful if you just updated the elevations and, yeah, at that, which,
Resubmit.
basically, it's the, yeah, it'd be helpful. I think it's all there, just.
Just resubmit it to you guys, and I have to resubmit it to the building permit people, but
That's it, yeah, you just spent building permit people, Brandon, just
Just
use
as
those.
a
So, yeah, we make sure, right, we can fly
well,
those.
I can send them to both people, so.
Yeah. But yes, just update the plan, nothing more than that, is what I was trying to say.
Okay, thank you.
Good plan?
Yep, and this
Okay.
is public hearing, so we still need to move into public hearing for this one.
Anyone?
Anybody want to address us on this zone change?
Millions.
Seeing none, we'll move out of public hearing. So if anybody has any additional comments, and if not, I would entertain a motion with the changes that we talked about.
We need a wordsmith.
so, yeah.
All right, I make a motion that we approve is this approve or recommend? Approve?
It's a zone change.
Let's see.
Approve? Okay.
Approve proposed changes to building elevations for the 430 North duplex with the modifications that we've recommended.
Tonight.
Perfect.
Which include the use of
rock instead of brick, if the applicant chooses, and the use of the board and batten on the side elevations as described by the applicant,
Perfect.
What he said.
if that's right.
That's right.
Okay. So I've got a motion.
Second.
Got a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
No, I'm an aye.
So does this go to city council vote, or is it?
No.
Nope. Part of this?
Done.
You're good to
We're gonna
go.
say it's done.
Approved.
Beverage, candy, tree. Thanks.
Other business. We've got some scheduling.
We got more topics?
Anything for the meeting, or should we adjourn the meeting and keep talking?
Brandon, you're not swearing football.
Adjourn, okay. Motion to adjourn?
What?
Second. I make a motion that we adjourn.
Got a motion?
Second.
Second, meeting is adjourned.